if you hit the button with your mic on it, it works really
Hey, thanks,
well.
I appreciate it. I am in number 2, not number 3.
And that's only because I'm in number 1.
He's number 1.
As
He's Bill
God
Murphy.
has ordained it.
How are you this morning, Bill?
I am wet. How about you?
Yeah, same.
But other than that, I am quite well. We've got a lot to talk about on the podcast today. Franz Borghardt with us. I'm going to talk briefly about the John Paul Funes sentencing. And then Vicki Dufrene from the Department of Insurance. It is that time of year. You're seeing all the commercials on television about the Medicare programs. You know, and a lot of people having People's Health and United Healthcare and Blue Cross Blue Shield and all that. And these can get very confusing if you're just in Medicare for the first time. Vicki is going to try to make it simple for you because that's what she does. Daniel Erspamer from the Pelican Institute has a study that they are releasing today that some of these lawsuits against our largest industry, that is the petrochemical industry, are costing us a lot of jobs and a lot of shared money, a lot of tax money. And he's going to talk about the nature of some of these lawsuits. So we have got a lot of ground to cover. We may go a little long today, just because we can. First, though, news that's messed up. One of my very favorite topics.
That's messed up, man.
All right, this one is from yesterday. The headline: "Wanted," all caps with a colon. Man accused of stealing purse at casino. Police are asking for the public's help locating a man accused of stealing a purse from a woman at a casino. Officers with the Baton Rouge Police Department say Latrone Williams followed the victim into a stairwell as she was leaving a casino. Williams reportedly snatched a purse from under the woman's arm before fleeing in a black-colored vehicle. For information on Williams' whereabouts, contact Crime Stoppers at... Now, what's wrong with that story, gentlemen? You both got good ears. What's wrong with that story?
I think I've lived here too long because I was like, nothing's jumping right out at me, Bill.
Well, they got the guy's name and they got his age, right?
Right.
Why do they need information on any of it? I mean,
but they don't say what casino. There are 3 in this town.
Well, you know why that happens.
To be fair, are there really 3?
Now, don't start that with me. Don't start that.
And you know why they do that? They don't specify the casino because the casino doesn't want the bad press from having someone gotten ripped off at their casino.
That, you know what?
It's like, that's our job.
This guy who is writing the story is a repeat offender, a frequent flyer again, and it's because he didn't think of it. The casinos don't control reporters. I mean,
so I'm going to go out on a limb here.
Professional courtesy.
I'm betting it's not LaBerge.
We don't know.
I'm just throwing that out there.
But well, actually, in the last 6 months, there have been 3 cases of theft and armed robbery and things like this at LaBerge, and they've said it's LaBerge every single time. So no, this is just this doofus. You know, want to make sure he spelled Latrone properly because he's got a funny name, too.
Did he spell casino correctly?
He did spell casino correctly.
I'll bet he pronounces it casina.
Casina, yeah, it's a well. So anyway, so there was that. And then, let me get this other one up. My screen is taking a long time to load. All right, now this, in fairness, I have to tell you that while this was run on BR Proud, the website for Channel 33 and Channel 44, they ran it as a news story. They did not originate it. This originated with their sister station, KTVE, in Funroe, Louisiana. And this is by James Selby. All right, now, in an ironic twist, a Florida man's in a Virginia jail, unable to walk after his stepdaughter shot him. Prosecutors say that was an act of self-defense in an attack he spent weeks planning. Virginia Beach police rushed out to a home on Bunsen Drive. Now, he's got Virginia capitalized, but not Beach. It's the name of the city, so he missed that, okay? When they got there, they found 2 women who were attacked and a man who was suffering from a gunshot wound. Outside, they found the suspect's car. In the front seat was a journal, in which in detail outlined an alleged plan to kill his estranged wife. The suspect is 65-year-old Henry Herbig. He drove to Virginia Beach, again, not capitalized, as if it was a beachfront on Virginia rather than the city, from his home in Florida. He left his cell phone at house. He left his cell phone at house so he wouldn't be tracked on GPS. All right, here's where it starts really going south, okay? He used only cash to avoid credit cards.
Wow.
He only stopped at mom and pop shops so there wouldn't be cameras and avoided tolls. Prosecutors say once he was in the beach, he put on a disguise, which included a wig, and went to the house with a gun and a large wrench. They told the court he had a bag full of zip ties, duct tape, and garbage bags. Herbig allegedly first attacked his daughter over the head with the wrench and then used that same weapon on his wife.
Nice.
And it really goes downhill from there. So, James Selby, you get News Grammarian and Sentence Structure Genius of the Month. And be our proud for not proofing what your ugly stepsister station from Fun Roast sent you. And there's our news digest for the day.
Wow. All right. Some of you may have been surprised and some not surprised yesterday when we heard that the sentence handed down to the former executive director of the Our Lady of the Lake Foundation, John Paul Funes. 33 months, I believe, was the sentence handed down.
33 months, 2 years of supervised probation, a $50,000 fine, and they had to check for restitution for $796,000 to go to the court, which will then go back to Our Lady of the Lake. Franz, we've talked about this for months, and you practice in federal court. We also know you defend people who are criminally charged, so you have a little knowledge with this. What is your impression?
First and foremost, I was actually in the courthouse yesterday. I will tell you guys, what does make a difference for a judge is when you have an outpouring of support. And Funes had, on all accounts, clergy, attorneys, friends, family, people that you would recognize as civic leaders here. They were outside of the courtroom. They were inside the courtroom. I don't know that Our Lady of the Lake Foundation was there, giving what we would call a victim impact statement. I don't know if that happened.
No news accounts mentioned that.
Yeah. So a couple takeaways. In federal court, it's a guideline range. Okay, unlike in state court where the judge can just give you whatever number within the sentencing range, you fall within a guideline range based on your behavior, based on your criminal history. He's what we would call a criminal history 1. He had no priors. So it's not outlandish. The sentence was not, quote unquote, outlandish. It's in a range. I know that Walt Green, who's a very skilled attorney, asked the court to consider a 12-month or less sentence. And essentially, I mean, that's, and I said this to you yesterday, Bill. We don't know whether or not he cooperated in the sense of cooperating with the federal government to possibly explore other prosecutions. We don't know that. That's under seal. However, that might have played a part in this in terms of the sentencing. And whether or not the government filed a motion to give him less time, the court could consider, hey, if this guy really did cooperate, we need to take that into consideration.
I understand what you're saying, but you and I have talked about this extensively, as has Kevin. And again, I want to say up front, John Paul is a friend of mine. I've known John Paul for a lot of years, and I was shocked and I was very upset when I heard about this. But you and I talked about this, and we said if he pleads guilty, I know that gets points off. Right. But he acted alone. Everybody agrees on that. So what does he have to cooperate with? Nothing.
So that's really the question, though, is he did act alone, but if some of his behavior, and I'm not saying it did in fact reach other levels of illegality, if some of his behavior spiderwebbed into inappropriate boosting, inappropriate use of money in other areas that could be criminal, well, that might be something not so much as in cooperating as to the Our Lady of the Lake crime, but other crimes.
Well, you're talking about other hands that touch the money, and what did they do?
Correct. So that being said, what is poignant is this. The amount of restitution, the amount of money, the amount of loss, puts him in a sentencing guideline range. Mm-hmm. And there may have been some negotiating there to get him into a bracket that it is seldom that defendants pay all the restitution to that amount of money all up front right after sentencing. So that is something that the judge probably took into consideration. Our Lady of the Lake was made whole, for the most part.
Well, what's interesting is he pled to 550. He showed up with a check for 796, which is just under the 800,000 that originally was talked about in terms of the loss. Yeah, I did. All right, and then Our Lady of the Lake, they're being very circumspect. By the way, they say they want to put this behind us, but they have said that their losses probably go above $1 million when you take into the forensic accounting costs, the auditing costs, the cost for their attorneys and things like that. I have to wonder. I mean, I have a very good relationship with the people at Our Lady of the Lake. My wife worked there for 10 years. We love the folks over there, the good sisters. They're kind of in the forgiveness business.
And there was clergy there yesterday.
I wonder if they very quietly said, may we send a statement, we don't want to read it, saying, look, okay, we love this man still, we hate his crime, and we're wondering if you can just let this pass.
So what was poignant to me, and unlike you, I don't know him. I've only heard, prior to this incident, I only heard good stuff about him.
Mm-hmm.
What was poignant to me is we are in a world right now to where if someone is accused of doing something, they become an immediate social pariah, and friends, family, a lot of times cut bait. That was not what you saw yesterday. What was very interesting to me was you had clergy there, you had attorneys that I admire and respect there to support him, you had friends, family. You had a St. Aloysius crowd, you had a Catholic High crowd. It was very, very interesting to me that, and maybe it is in fact that we hate the sin, but we still love the sinner. That being said, the blowback seemed to be yesterday, a lot of people didn't understand how you could steal that much money and get effectively such a low-level sentence.
Well, I was going to offer this to the conversation. I think a lot of plain old folks would think if it was a plain old folks working for OLLL that had managed to embezzle that kind of money, this sentence would be considerably stiffer. Somebody in the low to mid strata of the.
So you suggesting that some folks get a better servant of justice than others?
I'm telling you, I think a lot of people have that impression.
I don't think that's.
But what you know about federal sentencing? I mean, could this have gone much worse for him?
Oh, it could definitely.
He could have gotten 10 years.
So the judge could have upward.
So power, stature, and influence might have come to play here.
I think it's a double-edged sword. The judge is in a tricky position because if he does not, as a federal judge, he has no political allegiance. Mm-hmm. He is not elected, so he is not socially. He's not socially pressured in the same way that a state judge might be.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a double-edged sword. If he cuts this guy a low sentence, then what kind of message does it send to society? You know, but in the same breath,
if I'm a CEO, I'm thinking I can rip the place off and get 3 years in prison.
Well, and here's the double-edged sword part comes in the back end of it. This guy did a lot of good.
Well, there's that. But I would suggest that both of you, we kind of put a pin in this for 5 or 6 days because it's always been my experience that somewhere down the line, within a few days, we're going to hear the yeah, but. And then somebody's going to have another allegation or accusation that may or may not have merit. But I think what happened here, and I've never been quite sure how I feel about this. He took responsibility. He showed remorse. He pled guilty. You know, his attorney said, you know what, he knows what he did. He's going to admit to it in court. And for some reason, that shaves things down a little bit, where if you got somebody that's an administrator at, and I don't think they've had any scandals, so I can say this, Grambling, who's in their foundation. And he sits there and says, I didn't do it. You go ahead and prove it. And then at the last minute, they've got evidence, and he pleads, he's going to go to the max. You know it, and I know it.
So you have a constitutional right to a trial. You have a constitutional right to have the government bear its burden. But in the same breath, we the people, should like it when criminals, I'm going to say criminals, he's pled guilty, he's been sentenced. We should like it when criminals look at society and say, you got me. I'm not going to waste your resources. I'm not going to waste your time. And there should be a carrot for that. In the federal system, you get less points. The judge can consider it. You know, now the flip side is the federal system, when they pursue something, while you may still be in fact innocent, generally they're not pursuing flimsy cases.
No, they go whole hog. Yeah. Well, we'll talk about this again. Franz Borghardt,
gentlemen, good
also
to see
the
you guys
host
again.
of Legally Unfiltered, and I understand, a quasi-citizen of Spain now.
Yeah.
Well, I'm here in
a little
Italy.
worried when you were
Little
there
Italy,
amidst all
but-
the rioting in Barcelona. I was a little,
You know, I felt it was my duty to enjoy Spain, and part of enjoying Spain was the Barcelona Catalonian protests.
They have been doing it for years.
like,
Yes.
Spain, come for the riots.
Right. They taxi home.
Yeah,
They walked up, they marched to protest, but they taxi home.
And they burn garbage baskets in the middle of the street.
Well,
That's awesome.
joking aside, real fast, joking aside, it is always sad, whether you're here or there or anywhere, to see people destroying their own stuff.
They're St. George. They want their own.
Wow.
My wife made a comment to our guide, something similar, and I kind of went ballistic in a Bill Perfita kind of way. I said, did you just compare a multi-thousand-year feud to the city of St. George?
I did in one of your Facebook posts.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
think about it. Franz, we got to do a cash change
good to
here.
see you.
all right, guys, y'all have a good one.
Love to the family, my friend.
Vicki Dufrene from the Department of Insurance joins us now, and it might take the entire segment just to read her business card, but I'm going to try. Vicki is the insurance manager in the Office of Consumer Advocacy and Diversity, Senior Health Insurance Information Program, slightly higher west of the Rockies, void where prohibited.
Wow.
You didn't have to read all that.
You don't have a business card, you got a billboard.
And look
Hey,
at
I
you
tried.
flying school colors today. God bless you.
Yes, go Tigers.
It is Medicare Advantage Program sign-up time. For those who are on Medicare Part A and Part B, this is when you can either elect to change the person, the company that's doing your C, D, E, and F,
Yeah.
and all of these things, like D means drugs and things like that. Or if you're new to it, when you can make your election for who you want for the next year. This can get a little confusing. So your job is to make it a little easier. So go.
I prefer just to muddy the water more.
No, you're not in the legislature.
No, it is the open enrollment time. It started on October 15th and it'll run through December 7th. And yes, if they have a Medicare Advantage plan, like those Humana Gold Pluses, the People's Health, Blue Advantage, Aetna has a couple plans out there. Those are the ones that if you have one, you need to make sure your doctors are going to stay in the network and they're going to cover your medicines for next year. Then if you are like you and I talked last year, doing the Medicare Supplement with the prescription drug component separate, that's really what you need to be watching this year, because we've had some price increases on some plans. We've had plans bought out by other plans. So, you just really, really need to make sure that everything goes smoothly.
Now, something that I didn't know, and I think this is some pretty good consumer protection,
Okay?
is that the Advantage plans, not the supplements, okay, that's a whole different thing.
Correct.
The Advantage plans, many of them have a no monthly premium or a very low monthly premium, but also they have to be rated by their customers.
Yes.
So you can see how Kevin Gallagher, if he were in Humana, rated it, how Bill Perfita, if he were in People's Health, rated it, and they get to continue what they're doing based on what their customers have to say. So there is some consumer protection that's built into that.
Oh, yes, yes. So they as you said, they're based on ratings, star ratings, and when they get a 5-star rating, that company gets to advertise and enroll people all year long. Mm-hmm. So if you're in a 4-rated plan and you want to go to the better rated plan, you can do that. If you're in a high plan, want to go to a low plan, no, not necessarily would you do that. But yes, they are rated, and it is important when you don't like what's going on that you let your plan know.
Now, there are some doctors who do not belong to the networks. Like you'll have people that are in Aetna's network and Blue Cross's network, but they're not in United Healthcare.
Right.
You'll have people who are in People's Health, but they're not in Blue Cross. So I guess we're going to lie to everybody. No, we're going to say what Obama said. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor if you read who's in
Fine
the
print.
network.
Yes, networks are important, and looking at that information is extremely important because you basically have 2 types of plans. You have an HMO, which is extreme managed care, health maintenance. Then you have that PPO network that gives you that little, you can veer to the right or veer to the left. But you need to make sure that if you're veering to the right or to the left, you've got that money to pay that higher out-of-pocket cost, and that provider's willing to accept the terms and conditions of that plan if they're not in the network.
I have a question about age and status.
Okay.
If you are in the enrollment age group, but you're still employed and you're still covered by a group plan with your employer, is there any onus on you to get registered, get your name in the books, or anything like that?
No, if you are still actively working with health insurance from that employer or your spouse's employer, whoever's actively employed with that insurance, you do not have to enroll in Medicare at this time. Now, if you're working for a company that, say, has less than 20 employees and your premium's extremely high, it could be to your benefit to enroll in Medicare and pick you up another type of insurance other than that employer plan.
And what if you're, say, 60 and, say, 5 months ago you were released from your job and you're now self-employed?
That would not be Medicare.
You not old enough to ride
Damn.
this. To ride this ride, you must be this tall.
Damn.
You not old enough.
You would have to go on the marketplace.
Okay, well, actually, I'm covered under my wife's plan. Just wanted to get that digging.
Thank you.
But you can get Medicare prior to being at that level if you were deemed disabled by Social Security. You had worked and paid into the system, and you serve your 24 months of disability, and then that 25th month, that Medicare is going to come to you automatic.
So if you stop taking your crazy pills for 2 years, and we just got to keep an eye on you.
What kind of help does insurance, I'm getting serious now, what kind of help does the insurance department have for people who just find this seas they can't navigate? I mean, insurance is difficult to understand sometimes.
Oh, yeah. If I didn't do it every day, there's no way I could wander through this maze. But I have a division within the department called the Senior Health Insurance Information Program. And we are there to help answer questions and help you navigate through that maze. Look at the different prescription drug plans. In the state of Louisiana, we have 26 prescription drug plans for next year offered by 10 companies. So you can see you've got several companies that have multiple plans. Which one's the best one for me? As far as the Advantage plans go, you've got players that have plans all over the state. You have one player that has 6, probably 7 plans in some parishes. So it's trying to determine which plan is the best one for you, and that's what we're here to do. We have organizations throughout the state that also have certified Medicare counselors there that can help answer these questions and help you navigate through.
Now, also, the agents, the agents who will enroll you or explain different plans to you cannot make a recommendation.
Correct.
Can your people, since you're not agents, can you make a recommendation?
What typically we do is we give them their top 3 choices. Here's the plans that appear to be the most cost effective for you based on the information that you gave us.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of time to sit and look up every single doctor that you may see if you're looking at those Advantage plans, and we encourage the individuals to reach out to their doctors, and especially the ones they want to keep. If they're not too worried about or connected to a doctor, that's fine. Pick the plan that offers the best benefits for you. But if you're connected to those doctors, you need to call and ask them who you're going to accept for next year. But we will give them their top 3 plans based on what they are looking for. And if there's specific plans that they want information on, here it is.
I remember last year sitting down with an agent, a very good agent, by the way.
And they're typically your best friends.
And I looked through the doctors, and he said, everybody, even if you've seen them once, we need to find them. So it's like an ENT doctor I saw one time, but things like my cardiologist and all that. And in one plan, I found everybody but the dentist. And how attached are you to that dentist? And I said, well, kind of attached. Well, you need to go and see if she wants to get with this plan, because they can elect in as well for the sake of their patients. But it's amazing. You have to do your homework if you want to stay where you are in terms of your physicians. Now, if you've heard, Dr. Gallagher is every bit as good as Dr. Profita when it comes to gastro work.
That's not true. I'm a quack.
Well, yeah, but and he's in the network you're looking at with everybody else, but I'm not. Then you might say, well, that's okay. I've heard he or she is good. But now, will you sit down and look through the networks for them or with them?
We will, but if they have agents or they are looking for an agent, we're not going to give them a recommendation of here's an agent. We're not allowed to do that since we regulate the agents.
Right.
We have lists on the department's website, and we always tell everybody, if you don't have an agent but you use a local agent for other business like property and casualty or whatever, ask if they have some friends that write. But we will kind of help them look through it. But again, we're trying to serve 800,000 people, so trying to spend 3 hours with Bill is going to be a little bit hard for me at this point.
Now, what happens if, for whatever reason, maybe I lose track of time, or I'm dilly-dallying, or maybe there's a whole lot of family stuff going on, and it gets to December 6th, and I haven't made my switch? If I'm already enrolled somewhere, I stay. But am I stuck for a whole year if I don't make it by December 7th?
It depends on what you're enrolled in. So if you are in a Medicare Supplement where you're paying that higher premium to have that freedom to go where you want to go, those are lock-in. Well, you can move around in that anytime. That's not a lock-in from
Yeah,
Medicare.
because you're paying that big premium.
Right. The prescription benefit, yes, you would be locked in for the next calendar year. Now, for the Medicare Advantage plans, those actually have a separate different enrollment period come January. So if you are in one on December 7th, come January 1, we have what is called the Medicare Advantage open enrollment period, where you can go from Bill's plan to Kevin's plan, or Kevin's plan to Bill's plan. But if you don't like either one of them, you can go back to traditional Medicare, but you have to be in that Advantage plan on December 7th to take advantage of that particular enrollment period.
Now, there are people, and I think this stereotype has kind of died down, which is a good thing, that look at, insurance agents kind of the way they look at used car salesmen. But I found that working with an agent who could represent anybody
Yes.
for the Advantage plan was very helpful to me, and he gave me straight poop. He just said, look, I can't make a recommendation. I can help you research them. And I said, well, you're over 65. Who do you have? And he said, I can't tell you that either. So do you all kind of keep track if there are unscrupulous agents?
Yes.
In other words, can I say, I'm thinking about going to Kevin Gallagher. Do you have a file on him I can look at? And you say, yeah, and I pull it up and it got no complaints. And I say, okay, then I'll go. Or God, he's got 75 complaints just last year. I don't want to go with this guy. You've got that.
Told you I was
We've
a
got
quack.
that, yes. We can actually tell you if we've got complaints against agents and against companies. Now, if you're filing a complaint against a Medicare Advantage plan, we do track them, but those are all handled by Medicare because that contract is between Medicare and that plan.
Yes.
But a lot of them report to us. And, again, agents are your best friend. I highly recommend if you are looking to make those changes into an Advantage plan, use an agent because they're going to know more of the detail of the plan than what I would know. All those little nuances. If you're looking at the dental benefit, some of those plans offer dental. What is that nuance in there? I get $2,000 in dental coverage. What can I use it for? That agent will be able to tell you, well, Vicki, you can get dentures with that $2,000, or you can have 2 crowns during this calendar year. They know all of that information because they're there to inform their clients. They want to be your best friend.
Well, and most of them, if you see that their clients stay with them for a long term and buy several lines,
yes.
You've got somebody that's really reputable.
Oh, yes, yes.
Now, is there anybody that's excluded from selling this type of insurance? In other words, if I have my automobile insurance with Geico, for example, can my Geico agent find me a Medicare Advantage plan?
If he's licensed in health, life, and accident, yes.
Okay, so they have to be licensed in that area.
Yes, yes. And some are not, but they have reciprocating agreements with individuals, agents that sell health insurance, and they may refer you, look, I don't write it, but my next door neighbor does. And we go back and forth with business.
So in the first week of November, when things are wide open and people are writing policies, if somebody who is of the age for Medicare and they've got their Part B, by the way, it doesn't happen automatically. I learned this the hard way. You have to go to Social Security or go online and apply for it, folks. I learned that the hard way, okay? Oops. But they can go to their agent. Maybe they've got a family insurance agent. Are you licensed for this? Yes. Let's pick out a plan. They sign the paperwork. Does the policy take effect immediately? They have to wait till the first of the year. When does it all happen?
So if they're doing it for open enrollment, it will take effect January 1. If they are new to Medicare, their A and B are starting, say, November or December, then they can have their policy start on the first day of the month. It will always start the first day of the month, and they always end the last day of the month. There's no in the middle, per se.
Well, I can't think of anything else other than the fact that
are there any mandated coverages one has to have? I'm thinking about lasting effects of Obamacare. As a senior, what do you have to have as far as coverage?
Part D.
Okay.
A, B, which is going to be your traditional
hospitalization.
Hospital
And
is A,
physician,
B is doctors, and then D. If you don't have anything else,
You got to have drug coverage.
You got to have drug coverage, because if you don't, at some point down the line, you will be penalized. And that's not a late enrollment. I mean, that's not a late penalty for forgetting to pay your light bill. And you get the little green notice that says, if you don't pay it, we're going to disconnect you. No, you're going to get a disconnect notice, all right? You're not going to have drug coverage. And then when you decide to pick it up at a later date, you're going to be penalized, and it's a lifetime penalty.
Holy mackerel.
and how much
Yes.
are we talking here?
Depends on how long you're out. It's 1% for every month that you didn't have it when you first became eligible. And for next year, the base premium that they're using is $32.74. So you may have, a couple dollars, and then some people may have several dollars worth of penalty. Just depends on the length that they went. Now, if they have coverage from their employer, that's considered credible. They're not going to be penalized. As long as when that employment stops, they have a window of opportunity to get other coverage. They have to do it within that window. And it's typically 63 days from the time your coverage ends to pick up something new.
All right. If people would like to come and sit down with one of your experts, do they need to make an appointment?
It would probably be best, but we are typically have someone in our office, and we're downtown at the Department of Insurance. So we're back. Many people are familiar with the old Lady of the Lake Hospital. That's where we sit on the lake. We are there from 8 to 4:30, Monday through Friday, but they can call our office at 1-800-259-5300, option 2.
Hang on. Let me write this down so we can post it. 800-259.
5300, option 2, or 342-5300 would be the local number. And they can call us. We have voicemail, so they can leave it. I'll even leave my direct number.
Okay.
Oh, here we go. Is it 219-7731?
Yes. Or if they want to email me, they're welcome to do that. And they can actually go to the department's website, ldi.la.gov. Click on Consumer. You'll get a drop down for Senior Health, and we are steadily posting information for 2020 enrollment.
Well, we appreciate this. There's a lot of folks, we have got all kinds of listeners, but we have some folks that have some gray hair and are moving in this direction. So we may want to check with you again, maybe in the first week of the holidays, to talk about what happens in January for the new enrollees, if you don't mind.
No, I don't. And they need to remember, too, everybody's getting all this mail. If you're not Medicare eligible until next year, you don't have to do it right now. You're not going to be penalized.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah. Because, the mail pieces you get do it now.
Yeah, and everybody's saying by December 7th, Well, your Medicare's not starting until April or May. You don't have to do it by then. You'll just need to do it before your Medicare starts.
All righty. Vicki, thanks so much for being
Thank
with
you.
us this morning.
Thanks for coming in and see us.
We got a little more to talk about with you today. The Pelican Institute has got a new study that shows the cost of these lawsuits against oil and gas producers and what it means to the economics of Louisiana in terms of jobs. Daniel Erspamer, chief researcher, head honcho, the big cheese, the big kahuna with the he's the big beak at the Pelican Institute.
The big beak.
He's the big beak. He's the brownest pelican in the place. He's sitting in that big tree by the state capitol. He's got the info for us. I read through the material, and so we're looking at double-digit million economic impact because of lawsuits that you all feel basically are kind of specious.
Oh, absolutely. There's a couple layers to this. One is what we wanted to do, right? You walk around Lafayette, you walk around Acadiana, you can observe the impact of what's going on with the oil and gas industry right now. But we want to know, is there really a tie to the lawsuit abuse? Is this just something we think? What are we actually doing? And so we commissioned a deep dive economic study to look at, can we tell what exactly is the impact of the coastal lawsuits versus other things like price drops or changes in the economy, everything else. And the results are pretty stunning. 2,000 jobs lost in 1 year alone after the first filing in 2013 of the coastal lawsuits. And a conservative estimate of anywhere between $43 and $113 million each and every year in economic losses just due to the coastal lawsuits.
Now, certainly not everybody who lives in these areas that are basically involved in the oil patch, whether the supply or pipelining or production, not every lawsuit is specious.
Sure.
You all kind of geared in on the ones that are kind of like basically the big bucks version of slip and falls.
Absolutely. This is a really important point too, right? Because I want to be really clear. This is not. We think the legal system is really important. It's one of the most critical pieces of the whole government. The problem is when you have these litigious abuses, you end up hurting the people who are trying to actually make it through the system, who have a real grievance. These are crazy. This is how I think about it. It's like if we tried to give you, the government tried to give you a speeding ticket for exceeding today's speed limit in 1950 before there was a speed limit, and then tried to make you pay the cost and some interest on it for the last 70 years.
Are a great many of these class actions?
Some of them are, but the biggest challenge, the biggest one we're looking at is these are government-backed lawsuits. So the way this works is we back these lawsuits with taxpayer dollars. The lawyers, the plaintiffs' lawyers, agree to take these on contingency fees. So should they get a judgment, a big chunk of that money is going to the lawyers. And here's an important point. There's no guarantee a single penny will go to help coastal erosion.
Well, and again, I remember this was many, many years ago. It was a wireless provider, government-backed class action lawsuit, and they happened to be my provider at the time that it happened. They weren't anymore, and they said, if you want in, check this box, and I did. And a couple of years later, we have a settlement, and they sent me a check for $4.17.
Well, lucky you.
That was
big payday for the class action.
I hope you didn't spend it all in one place.
No, but I mean, it's.
That's often the case with these class action lawsuits. Is payday is not.
But I think what is critical here is if these are government-backed lawsuits that have taxpayer money going in, does that taxpayer money go back if there is a judgment?
Theoretically. But not so much. If we look, we see some rumors around what is supposed to be this Freeport-McMoran settlement that's been making the waves. Again, it's a bunch of slush funds. Taxpayers don't seem to benefit. And here's another interesting finding from the study. The local parish governments and state government rely pretty heavily on those royalties from the oil and gas community in order to fund government, roads, bridges. Oh, by the way, coastal restoration. What we found in the study is because of directly attributable to the lawsuits, local and state government are losing $22.6 million a year in royalty collections. And an interesting little tidbit, government is actually losing more each year than the oil companies are losing in profit because of these lawsuits.
Well, and again, I want to make it very clear because sometimes these things get a little hard to follow, and the average person, I don't even know, I'm just going to have to trust the attorneys.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about something here like Deepwater Horizon.
No.
We all saw that. We saw the flames. We saw the goo hitting the coast. We saw the marsh grass dying. We get that.
Yes.
This is not what we're talking about.
No, it's not. And frankly, most people don't know what we're talking about here, right? And frankly, I'm not even sure the plaintiffs entirely know what it is they're suing about.
A lot of this is over right-of-ways for things like pipeline and for transit and crew boats and things like that.
That's right, canals.
In 1989, you laid down a pipe that's 2 inches too big, and so now we want $25 million in damages, or we're going to make you move the pipe. Is that pretty much typical of some of these?
That's right, and these are cousins to a set of lawsuits that are happening on the left coast in California and some other places where local governments are suing oil and gas companies and whoever else they can find under climate change and that sort of thing. I mean, these are close cousins to those kinds of lawsuits. And look, let's be clear, when they're done with the oil and gas companies, look around. Whoever else is making money in the state, whether it's the chemical companies
the next
over
the fire
LNG,
line.
That's right. I mean, get ready. It's coming soon to a theater near you.
It'd be funny if they had a group of lawyers that sued the billboard lawyers for all their advertising claims.
Well, I'll tell you, as
how
you may
Machiavellian is that?
I've got one almost as good. The Pelican Institute has a public interest law firm. So we sue on behalf of freedom and free enterprise and limited government and protect individuals' rights. We are currently representing a gentleman in New Orleans, a lawyer, in suing the State Bar Association. A free speech violation. So as you may have seen, there was a landmark case in the United States Supreme Court last year called Janus. And what the Janus case said was the government cannot force you as a government employee to join, or anything. The government cannot force you to join a union as a condition of your employment. And so what happens if you're a lawyer in Louisiana, in order to get your license from the state of Louisiana to practice law, you are forced to join the private Louisiana Bar Association, which uses your dues to lobby against things like tort reform and all of these things. So you've got lawyers who are having to pay money by law into the Bar Association, and those dues are being used in part to lobby the legislature and take political stances.
So in other words, I didn't realize this, that when the attorney has to show up at 2 a.m. to spring Kevin from his latest DWI, and he flashes that bar card to get in, that's not issued by the Supreme Court. That's issued by a private entity that's basically a club.
That's right. It's basically a union.
Holy crap!
That you're forced to join if you want to be an attorney.
It's a little frightening, isn't it, Bill?
Particularly how many times we've had to come to get you.
Thanks.
I'm kidding.
So a great guy named...
He's sober as a... No, I don't want to say that. He's...
Don't make that presumption.
I did see there was some booze at the coffee bar.
They do great wines here at La Divina. They really do.
It looks great.
I'll hit it later. Don't worry.
Yeah.
So let me understand this. So the trial lawyers are backing this, okay?
Yes.
Trial lawyers are also backing the incumbent governor. Is there any connection there, or is it, should we factor this into how we cast our vote? I mean, I'm not asking you to recommend one candidate or the other, but what's the dynamic here?
Look, we've been talking, and so many others have been talking about the importance of legal reform and taking on lawsuit abuse. Obviously, the coastal suits are just one really big, but one slice of a broader lawsuit abuse problem. And so what we've recommended to citizens is that they ask people who want their vote a question. Where do you stand on this? What we've seen from the governor, certainly the first lawsuits, in fairness, were well before the governor was elected. These were filed in 2013. But, of course, the governor took office in 2016 and said, if you don't sue local parishes, we will as the state. And so this is a question voters and citizens ought to ask the gubernatorial candidates. They ought to ask Eddie. They ought to ask the governor. And anybody who's asking for their vote.
Well, and we've got the runoff for the executive mansion. We have runoffs for a couple of other statewide, like treasurer, right?
And yes,
Secretary of
State.
Yeah.
Kyle Ardoin and
not
Gwen
treasurer,
Collins-Greenup are in a runoff.
Oh, we've also
and then
got
there are some legislative runoffs.
Legislative runoffs, and I guess what I'm trying to point out, and if I misspeak on this, please correct me immediately, is that this new session might be the time that you can encourage your representation to actually take a good hard look at this. And again, to be clear, you're not saying coastal erosion doesn't happen and we're okay with that.
Right.
You're saying that this is also harming the efforts to put money back into coastal erosion.
It is, and it's not doing anything to help coastal erosion, right? The best way to do this, we know this from throughout history, bring people together, right? It's not an adversarial. The companies have put lots of money into it. The local governments, local nonprofits. It's when we bring the private sector, civil society, and government together to solve these problems that we get this. But suing the number one job creator is a surefire way to not fix the problem.
And let me ask you this. You know, one of the things that I hear from our attorney friends and from our friends in business like LABI and people like that is let's go to these slip and falls and automobile accidents. A lot of these entities and their insurers would just as soon write a check as opposed to go to court.
Right.
And how much of that is at play here with some of these suits where the big petrochemical producers or company owners or suppliers will say, look, I'm already paying, lawyers, a couple $100,000 a year, and I got 12 of them, just write the damn check.
That is absolutely the play here, I think, for the plaintiff's attorneys, is just wait them out, right? If you look at the merits of the lawsuits,
I notice none of these ever get to a courtroom.
That's right. I mean, this is just keep dragging out. Can you imagine, I don't know the number offhand, but can you imagine the amount of money an oil and gas company spends on lawyers every year?
Oh.
Even just for this case. I mean, at some point, right, I think that's the bet, is the plaintiff's lawyers say, well, at some point they'll get tired of paying lawyers and do the math and just pay us. It's extortion at the end of the day.
I mean, they're looking for that point of inflection. And it's probably a decent business practice, but it sure doesn't sit well with the downstream consumers that are either losing their jobs or having to pay more for the product because of this.
Yeah, and look, we hear every day from not just the big guys, but this has downstream effects to the smaller producers too, right? And we hear every day, look, at some point it's just not worth doing business in Louisiana anymore. And so those jobs, I was talking to a guy the other day. He's been in the oil and gas, blue-collar worker in the oil and gas business for forever and ever. He's got basically left his wife and kids a widow during the week. He's got to travel, get this, to New Mexico every week to work. But they love Louisiana. Their family's here. They don't want to move. These are families who want to stay. But at some point, it's not worth losing the breadwinner to a different state every week.
I wanted to get your reaction. Eric is watching us. Eric's a very thoughtful guy. And when we were first getting into this a couple of minutes ago, he said blaming big oil for the coast and not blaming the levees, the levee system, is funny. What's your reaction to that? I mean, isn't it a combined problem?
Well, right. Like with anything, there's very rarely, especially when we're talking about ecosystems and water and all of this, there's very, very rarely one culprit. Absolutely. The levee system has whenever we change the natural environment, we're going to get some unintended consequence, right? Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. So whether we're talking about, also we've got to take into play natural changes. There was this ad, you may remember, it was very powerful, that talked about we're losing 1 football field of coastline every day in Louisiana. In some places that's true, but you know what? In some places we're actually gaining land, right? This is ebb and flow of the environment.
And there are groups that are rebuilding. I mean, they've finally gotten the Corps of Engineers to listen to reason.
Right.
And all that dredging silt makes great marsh, and so instead of just dumping it out in the middle of the Gulf, they're getting some of it and they're rebuilding. There's can't remember the name of it, but there's an island that's almost been completely rebuilt. But that is conservation groups that's doing that, and they're not getting much help from the legal system.
That's right. And look, if there are fewer people with jobs and fewer businesses to help support this, and fewer taxpayers to help support these things, and fewer donors to private nonprofits, the problem doesn't get solved, right? So we don't kill the economy in order to try to fix the problem. I think that's the moral of the story.
So what happens next with this report? Where do you take it?
Yeah, so we're taking it all over the state. I spoke here in Baton Rouge yesterday. We'll be in Lafayette in a few days. And basically what our goal is to make sure that this is part of the debate. Right, it's important that when people make decisions, whether we're talking about an election, we're talking about what's to come in a legislative session, or even in parish government, right? Parish governments play a big role in making these decisions. So we'll be sharing this with all of the elected officials across the coastal parishes. The goal is get people educated, make the decision you think is best, but let's start with an actual set of facts rather than a bunch of anecdotes and stories. Then we can decide what's the right answer. Should we fix the problem or continue with the status quo?
Well, what's interesting is as you take your report around the state, this was just explained to me about a year ago. There was a very good study about coastal problems. And the thinking before doing the study was that when you go up to Shreveport, which is the third most populous area, they're like so far removed from it they don't care. But the study, and I can't remember if it was Audubon Society or CPRA or both, found out that they care very deeply about this in Shreveport and in North Louisiana. And you might have some legislative support up there that you may not even realize.
Oh, absolutely. You know, when we talked to legislators, I was in Shreveport a couple of weeks ago. First of all, there's a pretty decent oil and gas community in Shreveport. Now, they're facing different conditions and, frankly, different but almost as bad legal problems as the coastal guys are. But
it slowed down again, but the natural gas business up there was booming a few years back.
And of course now, too, we've become a net exporter in this country of energy for the first time. That has, as we talk to oil and gas producers there, especially the small guys, honestly, the small family-owned businesses, they're seeing huge benefit from that. And facing lawsuits, whether it's the legacy lawsuits or other things that, you know, it's, again, when the trial lawyers see a payday, that's where they're chasing. And let me be clear, it's not all trial lawyers. There's some great ones out there too, but we know the problems with it.
In general, and I'm not sure how I feel about this myself. I think I feel somewhat negative about it unless there was a demonstrated clear and present danger way before. Mm-hmm. For example, cigarettes. The legacy lawsuits on that, the settlements were huge, and that's because they knew. But I'm not so sure that if you look at these legacy lawsuits for like asbestos and all that, where they didn't know until after they had started removing it, and with some of this, as you put it, with the oil and gas companies, I'm not so sure that I agree with the admission of these lawsuits that go back for damages 30 years ago being filed in 2017, 18, and 19. I'm not so sure that satisfies equal justice under the law. That's my opinion as a non-attorney.
Should there be a prescriptive period? What does Pelican have a position on that?
Yeah, it's definitely something we have to look at. And obviously, this was sort of a negotiation in the package that moved in that Kirk Talbot sponsored last year. That was sort of a concession to the trial bar in that. Absolutely, we have to have statute of limitations and prescriptive periods for all of these things. And look, you talk about the coastal suits and a lot of these issues. Government was actually encouraging this behavior, so
they were permitting it.
Right. It's not to suggest somebody was doing something, you know, nefarious or secretive. This was incentivized and encouraged by government and particularly local government. So, you know, it's as a matter of policy, that's just bad policy. It's also, by the way, in general, why government is not so great at picking winners and losers in general, right?
Well, and quite frankly, in the past, some of our representatives in government from coastal Louisiana have been some of the most uninformed,
nincompoops?
I'm waiting for what word is coming here. Morons is the word.
You know. Morons.
Seriously, we had one just 2 years ago where the mayor of Grand Isle was going to take a protected sanctuary area and put an airport on it for one of his friends, and it took 25 people to say, mayors don't get to decide where airports go. And the state representative for the area said, yes, they do. No, they don't. Man. There's this thing called the Federal Aviation Administration and the State Department of Transportation. Oh.
We came kind of close to tort reform this year, but then good old Senate Jude, the legendary committee where good bills go to die.
Yes.
But now there's going to be a major turnover in the Senate. You have hope that maybe we could see something formative?
I absolutely do. You know, the makeup of the Senate is going to be substantially better than it was last year, the last couple of years. And frankly, the makeup of the House is going to be a little bit better, too. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think, too, we've got to go back. The bill, and Kirk Talbot was a great guy, is a great guy. He's going to be in the Senate. but there was some concessions made at the end of that bill to try to get it through the legislature that exists last year. We got to start over to some degree and say, what is the right policy? Let's start back with principle and see if we can get the best tort reform package, the best legal reform package we can get.
Well, and as a practical matter, it's very uphill when you have committees made up of attorneys, many of whom are trial lawyers, that decide on something that may cut their income and their colleagues' income and their family's income and the industry's income by 30, 40, 50%.
Yeah.
It makes it very, very difficult to do this.
It does, and you may have seen this letter that got circulated around over the last couple of weeks from a trial attorney imploring his friends and colleagues in the plaintiff's bar to contribute generously to Gumbo PAC and to the governor. And his case in that was, should they lose, should tort reform move forward, we will lose our businesses. We will, it was very direct. It's a good reminder, of course, don't put anything in an email you don't want printed on the front page of the paper.
Yeah.
But
and I hate to be so cynical because I believe that eventually it's going to get done, but instead of getting done with the cranes bringing out the steel, it's going to be one pebble at a time. I've got a very close friend who is representing a group that wants tort reform. And we talked, and I said, there is one attorney of many in this city that spends a reported $3 million a month on advertising. How much money you got?
Uh-huh.
And she said,
not
we
that
don't.
much.
No, not even not that much. We don't. I said,
Yeah.
You have your answer.
Yep. Oh, it's definitely an uphill battle. And while we're talking about trial attorneys, this is for our friends down south, but in Jefferson Parish, St. Tammany, Washington, there's a Supreme Court race going on right now. That is, I'm not taking a position on politics. We don't do that. But just looking at the information, you've got one candidate, Hans Liljeburg, who is the predominant number of his supporters are plaintiffs' bar attorneys, and particularly the firms that are representing the coastal parishes in these coastal lawsuits. And then you have Judge Will Crane, who has been very strong as a constitutionalist and has business support and others as well. So this has become a central battleground for this conversation.
Does anybody beside me find it just a little uncomfortable that we elect our Supreme Court justices?
Yes. There's a lot of models around the country. Some are elected. Some state Supreme Courts are elected. Others take the federal approach, right, which is the executive nominates with consent of the Senate or some legislative body. It opens us up for a lot of, I don't know what the word is, intrigue.
Intrigue is the word, I think. Yeah. Intrigue. Daniel Erspamer with the Pelican Institute. I assume that the media will have copies of your report, but what is the website should people want to go look at it?
Absolutely. It's www.pelicaninstitute.org. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. We'd love for your viewers and listeners to join in the conversation and be a part of this. It's important stuff.
Well, that's terrific, and we're so glad to have you, and
Thanks
we will see you again. Before we shuffle off, everybody, you see the sign here?
I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah, Selassie Jewelers is the very first real sponsor of the Morning Exiles podcast out in Denham Springs. It is a truly metropolitan jewelry store with just about everything right there on Range Avenue with the lovely antique stores in that beautiful strolling area.
And unlike a lot of jewelry stores, sometimes cramped square footage. Lots of room to move around, a beautiful store, lots of room to browse, and an awesome selection of jewelry and gifts.
They have a very, very pettable dog that sits on the couch.
Ruby.
Ruby in the front window for those of you that are dog lovers. But we're going to be telling you more about them in coming weeks. We're also going to be doing one of our shows, an extra show, from their location on the 7th of November. So stay tuned for more information.
But make plans for that afternoon, November the 7th, at Selassie's, 249 North Range in Denham.
Now, it is not raining very, very hard at the moment, but there is more to come. I just took a quick look at the radar. So be careful out there. You know the normal trouble spots. Let's try to stay dry and stay out of accidents, and enjoy the game tomorrow.
Go Tigers!
What do you think? I think Auburn's going to be up for this one.
I think they're going to be up for it. I think it's going to be close, but I see Tigers win.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a little bit difficult.
Which Tigers? Our Tigers.
Our Tigers, the real Tigers, not these faux Alabama Tigers. Yeah, War Eagle. Sorry, Pam.
They are their War Eagles now?
That's their cry, War Eagle. No, and then they have.
Why is their cry War Eagle?
Nobody understands. It's Auburn. They're in this god-awful little city in Alabama where they're the only thing that exists. I mean, you have to pump in light. 60 cents one side to the other in a cab.
The Mississippi state of Alabama.
They had the whole place carpeted. I'm talking small here.
Hey, have a great weekend. We'll talk to you again Tuesday morning from right here at La Divina.
Ta-ta.